Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Human hunting thread. Ohio Game Warden Anon here. I can confirm this does happen. I saw the Chas video about this, but there were several errors about how it is actually done. They do use flares sometimes, but it isn't to signal the start. These sick fucks actually want collateral damage. The spooky part apparently is that bringing hunters into the mix is a wild card. Also, bows, crossbows, swords, and bayonets are popular because if there's too much shooting, us law enforcement will come running. I found the results of one of these things before. 3 dead, very small area. I didn't know what I stumbled upon until I got it out of a detective later. Only one guy had a gun. He was a hunter. I don't think he is a participant. The other 2 had compound bows and in their packs. MREs, first aid kits, booze, sat phones, both had them WTF, thermal and infrared cameras. You're looking at about 2,000 worth of shit here at least. Hunters don't carry this kind amount of expensive stuff usually, and the other guy didn't have any of this. That's the only time I've personally seen this kind of thing, but people really do this. From what I understand, it's done with very small groups.
Proof.
I was employed through the Department of Natural Resources and not trained for any of this. It took forever to get detectives out there, and at first they didn't believe us.
Proof.
And what year did this occur?
2013, back in February.
Oh, good luck, OP. Game wardening is based.
Hopefully they get you next. Fuck you, I'm gonna keep hunting with tapered cartridges and there's nothing you can do to stop me.
There was actually a set of these human hunting incidents over the years, but I only found results of a small one. But after that, I didn't feel great when I heard random gunshots in the forest at night. I used to go investigate to see if some asshole was shooting a deer without tags, because I'm a narc. But after that, nah, I legit thought that stuff was BS for years.
Buddy and I got shot at by human hunters or a dude running security for a drug farm. A few years ago, I went out on a new route up to an abandoned mine I found on Google Maps and wanted to check out. Brought along an old industry buddy who's more of an armor salesman than a tactical dude. I'm a retired Marine who works in the defense industry now for context. He had the gear and endurance of a mule, though, and wanted to train with me while he was visiting. Plus, I got a free ballistic helmet I was more than happy to accept. Got out to about 7 miles into the woods when he and I both got the feeling of being watched carried on until we hit the old mine that was at the tip of a valley. Some of the structures were still intact. There was an old 20s-era truck that was shot to shit. Most of the things in the mining camp had roughly the same treatment. This is not unusual for this area, so we made camp for the evening and prepped some food. Not much happened from here until the event, mostly banter and music. Then my buddy, we'll call him Drake, shut off the music and grabbed his rifle. I followed suit and got close, asking him what was up. He pointed up to a ridgeline to the far right of the valley we were in and said he could see some movement on it. Sat silent listening for a bit. I thought he might have seen a deer, but he's a dude from LA, so him panicking over a deer was kinda expected. We heard some rocks tumble down into the valley where Drake pointed. I called, asking if anyone was there. A shot impacted near us, followed by a report. Drake about shit himself, and I ran, practically dragging him by the carry strap on his PC to one of the buildings where we could be out of the view of the ridge. Called out again saying to not shoot, and was answered by another bullet hitting the house. I was pissed, Drake was scared, and some asshole on the ridge was playing Jeffrey Dahmer. Got Drake to calm down and explained what our situation was while the house was getting intermittently hit with a bullet every now and then. Our only easy way out was probably in the view of where the shots were coming from, with some tree cover. We were gonna have to leapfrog our way out till we could go around the bend, behind the adjacent mountain. Pointed out to Drake where to run to. That's when he realized what was happening and what the situation he was in was. The next few minutes was me dumping a mag from my AR into and around the point of the ridgeline the shots came from, while Drake bounded to the first large tree, where he did the same with his rifle as I gathered our belongings, and passed him to the next tree. We repeated this till we hit the bend and hightailed it back to my truck, where we went gunning down the dirt roads until we hit the highway. We drank a lot that night, and Drake had nightmares about that afternoon for some 3 months after that. Even mentioning it shakes him up a bit. I think it might have been a drug farm, since those aren't common, but not rare in the US mountain ranges, or it was human hunters. People who gear up and play a sort of last man standing deathmatch against each other, who may have mistaken us for players. Either way, that asshole didn't try and follow us, and since being back, I think that whole area is bad juju because everyone I've talked to has felt like they were being watched. I still do when I'm up, and the cops never followed back if they did find anything of note.
Do you really think all those people who disappear in Missing 411 are actually dying to mountain lions, Bigfoots, and the cold? Plus, there were recent cases of serial killers like Samuel Little or Anthony Sowell who confessed to stalking lone hikers or unsuspecting couples through the woods. And then there's the Schengen zone. How many of those migrants do you think don't actually reach their destinations and end up in a marshy bog?
Here it's called stomping. It's not an organized event with unhinged but consenting adults. Film and movies might try to portray gangbangers with a gruff sophistication. In reality, most grow up with mothers who send them out into the hall when a stranger comes by. Nothing resembling a guiding authority, perhaps God, otherwise no teacher, no father or mother, no one they can respect or learn from. They get bullied by people later on in the cycle, not online. It's a constant vicious abuse and humiliation. Telling some crying kid to leave while their mom does her job. The 4-foot-high spot of blood on the wall where someone's head was repeatedly smashed. All this until someone is willing to use them until they end up dead or worse. A life that never had a chance. There are millions in the world. I live near a few. Don't go outside when someone screams. Stay inside. Mind your business. Maybe the police will come or maybe not. If you're targeted, then the bars on your windows will be beaten in. Some of the bars haven't been torn from walls, the windows get smashed, and then they will rush in. Ignore the screams. If you're not stomped on the first night, then people will try to run. It doesn't matter who is in the house, everyone is a target. This is why it's called stomping. A neighbor ripped someone off, was nosy, or slept with someone they shouldn't have. I hear the thuds of sledgehammer on metal. The window shatters, but the thudding continues. It's rhythmic, and I can hear several crying shrieks. Neighbor has a family. At 1:17 a.m., they give up and I can't sleep. At 3:15 a.m., I hear their door swing open. I'm terrified they are going to knock on my door. They don't. I hear running, then gunshots, then screams and yells. 3:23 a.m., I hear another pack running, then stomp, stomp, stomp. It sounds like a fist against flesh. Shrieks. I don't hear bones breaking, but I do hear a plastic bag of viscera pop open. 3:40 a.m. There is silence, and I go to sleep. 10 a.m. Go outside. No police. See an empty purse and an open luggage bag. Crowd near the corner. There is a piece of gooey flesh on the sidewalk. One bloody sheet is draped over lumps on the ground. One man lies next to one woman. Gunshots in their lower back. Shoulder blades look like mashed potatoes. Pieces of chipped white bone and teeth around their heads. Head flat, deflated. Keep your head down and walk away. Pick unrelated.
I have to be honest. I do prefer justice is served utilizing a civil and lawful avenue. However, if anyone pick up proven ruthless criminals who had no regard for others' rights and lives, and wants to have some fun and be sporty while terrifying, if possible awful guilty scum, why not? I don't judge. However, most likely being innocent or guilty, kind or unkind, is not considered, and this occurs all the time, unfortunately.
So, do any of you know anything about human hunting? The kind of hunt that is like an organized death match, not the kind where you just hunt some poor defenseless sod in the forest. Yeah, it's called the military. Major countries decide world decisions by playing a game called war, wherein they send hordes of organized warriors to some giant open arena, they call it the theater, to see who manages to hunt the most humans. You can win pretty big prizes, small nations, wives, trillions of dollars worth of oil, etc. Of course, if you're in it for the hunt, the politicians organizing it are going to be the ones taking the loot. Warriors have to stay true to the hunt and not take trophies.
We have 2 known serial killers who practice this style of killing. Israel Keyes and Robert Hansen. Think there could be any validity to some of the disappearances in the U.S. being caused by people deciding they want to hunt the most dangerous game. If it is happening anywhere, it is in Alaska. A lot of human trafficking runs through that state as well. But Oregon and Washington? Nah. I grew up around actual wilderness. Since moving up to the Pacific Northwest, I've found that what passes for remote and spoopy is pretty tame. People here hike a couple hours Innawoods and think they are far from civilization. The Pacific Northwest was about the only place in the world where the native peoples were sedentary hunter-gatherers. Food and water are plentiful, the climate is fairly mild and hospitable, shelter is everywhere. Even on the east side in the deserts and plains, survival is pretty easy. There is industry everywhere here, farming, military installations. It would be extremely difficult to hunt humans here without every Tom, Dick, and Harry noticing. Oregon is a little weird, but it is mostly communes, hippies, religious nut jobs, or mustache men. They aren't remote enough to provide fodder for hunting grounds either. Alaska, though. Look up the FBI reports sometime on the number of Alaskan native women and foreign women that are found in the wilderness up there, partially skinned or with trophies taken off their bodies. The FBI actually thinks there are companies that will charter planes and guides to take people out there to hunt women, and they've had this theory since the 70s.
Idaho here, Oregon and Washington are literally just barren desert bullshit or farms outside of their cities. Out here where half the state is forest and mountain, you don't really worry about it because you have guns. All the people you politely wave to while traveling or camping in the woods have guns. Rangers have guns. And so does literally every private land residence. Also, there's a shit ton of loggers and what have you. So even in the middle of nowhere, there's still traffic and society doing its thing. Bored people on drugs are a more pressing concern.
There are about 50 to 170 active militia groups that live off the land out there. They all communicate apparently, but some aren't friendly with each other. I heard all about them. I don't think the original human hunting thread was actually all sport. They wear armbands. It was probably a squabble between militia groups. This apparently happens and they go to war with each other. The flares and the dead woman he mentioned sounds more like what I'm talking about here. I didn't see flares, but they had several on them. The sad part is, as I said, they are trying to get innocent people to come investigate in case somebody needs help, only to get murdered. I think they just surprised the hunter, though. Poor guy.
Bullshit. News story. The media would absolutely eat this shit up if it was real, and blast it everywhere. The fact they aren't means it's 100% bullshit, just like the Wendigo/Skinwalker/Blair Witch/Bigfoot shit.
No, I don't know why. I think it actually went down as a hunting accident, but I don't believe that here's what I think happened just for scale. Guy out trying to poach a deer at night. 3 or 4 other guys are creeping around trying to kill each other for whatever reason. Compound bow guys, ambush hunter, because they think he's crossbow guy. The crossbow guy locates them from the hunter's startled shooting. Crossbow guy kills one, gets seen. Then he reloads while other compound bow guy was chasing him. As I said, I don't think the guy with the rifle was involved with whatever they were doing. It's creepy, though. They were clearly there with intent, though.
There were 5 of us, Frank, Al, Tony, Clancy, and me. I didn't know the guys that well, and I won't tell you how we met because that'd be dumb. What's important is what happened here, which is what I'm about to tell you. At 2:30, July 8, 2017, I snuffed out my cigarette and put away my lighter before I raised my flare gun in the air and fired. I popped the flare out and slipped the gun back into my ruck. In no particular order, Frank, Al, Tony, and Clancy all fired their flares, and the game was on. I started toward the closest flare to mine, which was maybe 150 meters away. I dropped to the ground on top of a small ridge and shouldered my SKS. The only sounds were the bugs and night birds. Then I spotted my target. Moving low and slow, I could just make out his silhouette in the cold gray moonlight. I tracked him with my sights from left to right. Every fiber of my being tensed. There was more adrenaline in my arteries than blood, and my grip on my rifle tightened. Then he stopped. He took a knee and raised a rifle of his own, doing the exact something I was to someone else. My finger rested on the trigger and slowly started pulling back, pound by pound. My rifle went off. Birds flew, animals ran. Bugs stuttered for a second before starting to chirp again. I swung myself around to put my legs over the ridge and dropped all the 6 feet it was. I ran low across the 50 meters between me and the man I had slain. I cut the armband off his arm and grabbed his ruck before I ran back off. I found a safe place behind a tree before I rifled through my spoils. 2 bottles of water, a first aid kit, and 2 AK mags. I slipped a round out of one to replace the one I'd spent on the previous owner and put them in my ruck. I looked at the armband I had claimed and saw that it was Al's. I tied it around my arm as per the rules. A couple of shots rang in the distance, then a flurry of them, smaller ones that sounded like firecrackers, something pistol caliber. I couldn't tell if there was another kill, but I didn't have time to worry about it. A bullet slapped the tree right next to my head. I dove to the ground and rolled away. More rounds cracked over me, some getting closer than others. They were so slow it had to be from a bolt action. I hit a slope that took me down and covered me from the shots. I got back up and hauled ass away, fish hooking around and getting eyes on where I'd been. A figure creeped up to Al's ruck and I let him start poking around in it before I fired. The shot was sloppy. I was still a little shaken, so it went wide. The figure jumped and ran behind the tree. I got low and ran for a better angle. I circled around him, but he circled around me. I barely caught him running down the slope that had saved me from him. I made for the slope, flipping up my bayonet just in case. I hit the top of the slope and found my prey already facing me. I'd made a bunch of noise being a dipshit. He fired first, but it went wide. He was using a bolt action, so there was no follow-up shot. I put 2 in his chest and he went down. I swiped his ruck and armband and ran. It was Clancy. His ruck had a box of .3006, some water bottles, a roll of gauze, and a bottle of bourbon. I took a sip from the bourbon to warm up my fingers and tied the band around my arm. I loaded more rounds from the AK into my SKS, having spent more than I had wished on Clancy. I checked my watch and it was 0330. An hour had passed. I dug the flare gun out of my ruck and fired a fresh flare. Another flare flew up not far away, so I hit the ground and stayed there until the flares went out. I watched the moonlight for any sign of movement. There were only 2 of us after only an hour, but that's what happens at the end of the tournament. My rifle was shouldered and the bayonet was still out. The woods were silent, not even a cricket dared chirp. A bullet cracked over my head and the report of the shot followed close by. I flinched like an amateur and more rounds followed. I rolled behind a tree and listened to the rounds carve up the other side. I managed to get up to a kneel without poking out from behind cover, and I leaned out and scanned the darkness. A muzzle flash snapped my attention to my right. The bullet hit the tree and I started returning fire, dumping my whole mag. I ran up a slope and jumped into a shallow creek, digging a clip from my pocket and sliding the rounds into the magazine. It took a second, but once I came down a little bit, I felt the warm trickle from above my ear. I touched it and it stung. My finger came back with some blood. It was a graze, nothing serious, but it was too close for comfort. I rode the bolt forward slowly to keep it quiet and looked down the slope. I spotted a flash of movement and fired at it. A muzzle lit me up from a completely different position. I ducked my head down and crawled along the creek for a few meters before peeking back up. The muzzle was still flashing, so I started firing back. It stopped, and I saw a figure flick behind a tree. I put another 2 rounds at the tree to keep the fear of God in him. I kept my sights lined up on that tree for what felt like forever, just waiting for an inch of movement. The sky fell dark as a cloud passed under the moon. I saw a flash in the minimal light, and I started dumping rounds into the night, giving me a stuttering picture of my target running. The bolt locked back and I dove back down, loading my another clip into the magazine and sending the bolt forward loudly. Rounds cracked over my head and I kept crawling down the creek. This was a big-ass cloud with very little wind, so it stayed dark. We'd be shooting at muzzle flashes until we were both out of ammo and forced to stumble around for each other in the dark. I decided that even though it hadn't been an hour, I still could use a flare. I took out my lighter and flicked a flame to life and just stared at it for a second, until my eyes were properly adjusted before I dug out the flare gun, loaded it, and sent a flare into the sky. The forest lit up again and I sprung up. We were close enough that I could see him squinting in the light as I raised my rifle and started shooting. He shot back, running downhill. My rifle ran dry, so I slung it onto my back and drew my sidearm. It was still hard to shoot straight, with bullets screaming and cracking all around my head, and with blood from the graze starting to trickle down my neck. I went through all 8 rounds of .45, dropped the mag and reloaded. It wasn't until I had reloaded and the haze cleared enough to realize the cacophony I'd been filtering out was no longer cracks and pops, but the screams and moans of a man. I saw him lying on the ground, a hand on his stomach, his breathing heavy, and every sound one of agony. I approached him and looked him in the eye. It was pure animalistic desperation. The look he gave me threw out all the pleas in the book. It told me that he had a family, that his kid was sick, that he was all his dad had left, that he had a mentally disabled sister to take care of, that he could make it worth my while to spare him. I put my bayonet through one of those eyes and cut the bands off his arm. It was Tony, and he had killed Frank. I rummaged through his ruck, finding one last mag of 5.56 for his Mini 14 and some water and medical supplies, standard stuff. I loaded my one green flare and sent it up before I began the trek out of the woods. I made it back to my car at around 6. I tossed my guns and ruck into the back and took the envelope from under the windshield wiper. Inside it was $10,000 in cash and a note that thanked me for my participation. I tossed it in the passenger seat and drove off.
Human hunting is largely bullshit, but more plausible than other /x/ posting. Most commonly, if a human hunter existed, he would be alone and just be a regular serial killer, but with a different or odd MO, nothing more. It's extremely telling that this BS started taking off with the flares and such, when PUBG, Warzone and Fortnite got popular with the kiddies. Closest real example is Robert Hansen. That said, always carry, even and especially in the woods. It's dark and a lonely place usually. And you'd certainly be carrying in a city, right?
The flares and other dress-up may be bullshit, but human hunting absolutely happens. The wardens and cops try to downplay it, but it's a poorly kept secret in the Ozarks. Bodies don't just appear with gunshot wounds in the middle of the forest. I've stumbled on them myself, and my reports were always characterized as hunting accidents, even if there was no way in hell. Shot twice with own rifle. In .243, both to back, no rifle nearby. Oh.
What you are describing either sounds like a simple murder or a legit hunting accident. Your specific incident included, oh shit a der. Oh shit, the der was Jed. Or Hillary Clinton was in the area also. Arkansas. LOL, need I say more?
Whatever you want to tell yourself, man. If that one doesn't do it for you, I can offer other anecdotes, but I assume you're one of those skeptics that trolls threads like this solely to pick apart every post for your own ego. You know what's real interesting about the Ozarks, though? Besides also being in Missouri and Oklahoma, you geographically illiterate spurg, it's real rough terrain to cover unless you're kitted out for it. Old boy who had his hunting accident, in a pair of well-worn Walmart athletic shoes and without a bit of camo or orange on him. Real curious how a regional native would go out in the woods to bag a deer and the sort of shit you'd go to work at a gas station wearing. Oh, especially when it was out of season.
And also Arkansas, you fuckwit. The entire northern half of the state is the Ozark Plateau, including Fayetteville. Your story, assuming it's true, does sound exactly like a hunting accident I described. The fact it wasn't hunting season makes it even more plausible, because someone was out poaching, heard noise in the woods, was probably a half case in, and fired. Oh shit, it was a guy fucking around in the woods. It's certainly more credulous than he was human hunting in similar attire. The world is as scary enough without you incels making shit up. Maybe it was even a murder made to look like a hunting mishap, but this whole roving groups of people playing Warzone IRL is utter shit. That's the biggest hole in your story and cause. Why would someone going deep into the woods in bad terrain be equipped, or not, as such?
Are you unfamiliar with the word also, KHHV? I'm from Arkansas and seem to have a better grasp of the English language than you. Anyways, you're putting words in my mouth. In what way does it sound like I'm describing a human hunter and not a victim of human hunters? I'm not describing Warzone IRL either, you fucking asshole. I'm describing an extremely suspicious death in the middle of a forest. I'm describing someone who had no business being where he was dead from what is overwhelmingly a bolt-action cartridge that plugged him twice in the back. You ever been out in the woods and seen some douche through the trees in blue jeans and a graphic tee? They don't look like a deer. Even if your supposed poacher was out at night, that just makes this dude's presence more suspect and the situation more unlikely due to the prominence of NVGs in hunting culture, especially in a game-rich environment like the Ozarks. I can pick apart your explanations as easily as you can mine. You think the world is scary enough? I don't think you understand the gravity of the nightmare world we live in. There's plenty of shit that will kill you in those hills, but thinking that human hunters aren't one of them is hopeful at best. Even you said it could be a murder, and I agree. Whether you want to call it human hunting or not is semantics.
I guess I'll talk about Bigfoot too because we did deal with that. I don't like to talk about that. I posted a thread on /x/ about Bigfoot. They are terrifying. One of the things they do if they kill a deer is crush its skull, and then they rip off a limb. The park rangers near us were very aware of the issue and closed the park several times because of them. They would also huck shit that they killed into people's yards. The cops thought they were being funny, referring to the Bigfoot calls to fish and game, but we took it pretty seriously. We were in charge of observing wildlife, and when they were in the area, they hunted a lot. A Sasquatch kill is very distinctive.
Be 17-year-old me hunting at the Manistee National Forest with my brother and dad. With permission from an old guy my dad knew from work. He warns us that his neighbor is an asshole with 40 acres, cocky and buck fever. So end up walking far from fam and end up on private property, and in head thought that the neighbor wouldn't notice. Put my tree climber up and sit down at 4:30-ish. After about 5 minutes we heard walking. It's the neighbor pretty sure, but steps are behind me. He gets like 10 feet away from the tree behind me and shoots a gun in the air, I assume. Starts screaming at me. I rope my gun down and start crying, trying to get down from the tree. Apologize multiple times while freaking out. Old guy continues yelling at me, says, "I knew you fuckers were on my land." Asks me whose kid I am. I just keep freaking out, grab my shit and power walk away. The old guy says I'm a real shit. Feels good to look back on that story. It shows that dumbass kids need to listen.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.